tackling tough topics to help you think reasonably about life's most important issues. This is Thinker Sensitive.
You're listening to Thinker Sensitive. This is Chad Graham. I'm here with Ryan Ragozine, pastor of Living Stones Church. Ryan, thanks for being with me today.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're here talking about this idea in Karl Marx that religion is the opiate for the masses. Ryan and I have been talking about this for some time, and we decided to bring it into the podcast because we thought we would just kind of reflect on what that actually means and how that has seemed so incompatible with our personal experiences with Christianity. So, Ryan, I'm going to kick it to you. Why don't you explain a little bit of what this concept means and, what are we talking about when we say religion is the opiate for the masses?
Yeah, so as you pointed out, this idea comes from Karl Marx. Karl Marx is, of course, famous for his socioeconomic ideas, known as Marxism. But he also had this critique of religion, as you say, which is the idea of religion as the opium or the opiate of the people or the masses. And really what that means, to kind of translate that in language that we would use today, is religion basically as a drug or as medication that allows people basically to function.
Yeah.
And it's essentially saying that religion is a coping mechanism.
And a social lubricant, right?
Yep.
Like a way for us to interchange with each other, a way for us to connect, a useful fiction. Really.
Yep. It's an illusion. So it's false. It's almost like creating an alternative, view of reality, but it's purely an illusion, but it's used as a coping mechanism. It allows me to cope in my daily life amongst all the struggles, all the difficulties, to cope with that, like I would use a drug.
Yeah.
Only a drug, is real and is actually actually affecting the body or the mind.
Altering the mental states.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so where does this idea, is Marx the first one to really put this forward, or is it Feuerbach? Who is it?
Yeah, so Marx is not the first figure in history to critique religion, of course. When we think about the modern period, we think about the Enlightenment forward, the modern era in history. Really, the first major historical critique of religion that's often cited by most of the great modern theologians would come from, and I don't speak German, so forgive me, would be Ludwig Feuerbach. Feuerbach. He was a German philosopher and anthropologist. He lived in the 1800s, so he's basically a contemporary with Marx, but his critique of religion influenced Karl Marx. And so he Feuerbach put forth this idea that religion is a human projection. Religion is a self-projection, which means that religion is a projection of my values and my wants and my desires and my needs. Okay. I project myself onto God and create this kind of idea of God out of myself, out of my values and my desires and wants. And
so in so doing that, I really create, again, like what Marx was saying, this opiate, this idealism that we're constantly striving for and reaching for. It kind of gives us something to do. It gives us a way to orient our longings, really, right?
Yep.
But it's not this objective deity or system of religious doctrines that the Christian religion would put forward.
Right.
It's just merely this projection.
Yep. And it's simply this idea of God where God simply conforms to my desires, my wants, so that my religious belief is simply an expression of exactly what I would want religion to be. God becomes exactly what I want him to be. And my faith is all just an expression of what is convenient for me and what I would want. I become the creator of religion.
Right. Well, really, it's almost self-deification. It's putting yourself in that seat. And so how does this contrast Marx? How is this different than Marx?
I'm not sure that it contrasts all that much. I think it's very, very similar. I think they kind of go together.
Yeah.
And there's another historical figure, Sigmund Freud, who, of course, was a very famous neurologist and psychologist into the 20th century, who also had another idea that kind of goes hand in hand with Feuerbach's projection theory and Karl Marx's idea of religion as an opiate. Sigmund Freud believed that, or he viewed religion as wish fulfillment.
Right.
And also as a projection of the mind. And so God simply becomes, again, an expression of our wishes. Our wishes, our desires, what we would want to be true is fulfilled in our religious ideas. And so all three of these views, these famous modern historical critiques of religion, kind of go hand in hand. They're all very similar. Yeah.
Which is, I just find this so interesting because when they were giving this critique, when they were looking at the way we were ordering society, and they were looking at how religious power figures were dominating certain parts of Europe and expansionists in the global South and things like that. In that day, the church the Christian church globally looked very different than it does today.
Yes.
If they were to make those same comments today in response of like a Joel Osteen, I'm just going to be real here, like a prosperity gospel movement or something like that, I wouldn't fault them.
Yes.
I would say, man, if they're critiquing that, man, that is wish fulfillment. But if you look at a rigid, historical, orthodox view of Christianity, die to yourself, right? Live in the charity of others. Give of yourself at every turn.
Love your enemies.
Love your enemies. That doesn't sound like opiate.
No, it doesn't.
To me.
No, it doesn't.
That sounds like self-denial. It sounds like not accepting the natural self. It sounds like finding a higher ethic to aspire to that's extremely rigorous, and the way is narrow, and the opening is for the few. I don't know how you look at what Christianity calls you to do and be, and think that is somehow self-soothing hysteria. What do you think about that?
Right. Yeah, I think that Christians and I think that the church need to be open to criticism, first of all. Yeah. And they need to hear these criticisms, and they need to do self-evaluation and think about where there may be areas in our own personal walks with God, the way we read the Bible, our interpretations, where there may be areas where these critiques can speak to. But I also think that these historical critiques are open for critique as well. I think that these critiques serve to critique certain forms of religious thought in our world today. I think that they critique kind of a classical liberal theology, which reduces Christianity and reduces doctrine basically simply to ethics or human morality or being a good person. And I think that they speak to kind of a popular religion in the West today that I would actually call popular Western pantheism. And I think that...
Explain that.
I think that in popular Western religion, there is this kind of view that God's thoughts are our thoughts, and my values and my ideas are God's values and God's ideas, so that there's not a separation or a distinction made between God and myself and between God and culture, so that culture and God are identified with one another. Christianity, though, says that God is transcendent. He's wholly other.
Right.
So he has his own mind that is different than my mind, so that he has thoughts or ideas that may conflict with my thoughts and ideas. He has values that may conflict with my values. And so if I don't make a distinction between God and myself or God and culture, then that, I think, is a form of wish fulfillment. It's a form of projecting myself onto God. And I think that can be an opiate for the people, because God just conforms to everything that I believe.
To my deepest desires, whether they're right or wrong.
Yep. God agrees with me all the time. He affirms everything I do. He affirms everything I believe. He's basically a yes God.
Yeah.
Christianity, on the other hand, says that God is different from me. He doesn't always agree with me. He doesn't always affirm everything that I do. In fact, he disagrees with me maybe on many things, or doesn't affirm many of the things I do, and doesn't like, some of the things I do. Yeah. And that is a much harder idea to accept than more of a pantheistic understanding of God. So I think particularly in our contemporary culture, in our day and age, there are so many aspects of Christianity that I think are troubling to people of our day, that are distressing, that are offensive. And so I don't think Christianity in any way conforms to many people's desires or wants or values today. Mm-hmm. I think in a lot of ways, Christianity is very countercultural. I think it has always been countercultural. Jesus was countercultural. Jesus continually went against the grain of the religious leadership within Israel of his day. And it continues to be extremely countercultural. Mm-hmm. It doesn't conform to what I want all the time. It doesn't conform to my desires. And there's so many elements that we could go over and name and say, yeah, this is highly countercultural. Yeah, this absolutely conflicts with what many people in our culture believe or want to believe. And so I don't think Christianity falls under these historical critiques, certainly not in our contemporary culture.
And so the contemporary dangers of just accepting ourselves the way we find ourselves and making that the highest ethic, or making that God, or allowing our most base desires to be what's true and what's right, that does look like the religion that Marx and these others are critiquing. These things that are wish fulfillment, these things that are, just self-aggrandizing the base man, the fallen creature. But I think that's, maybe there is some wisdom there to hear those critiques and say, the Christianity of old, the Christianity that's orthodox and true, the words of Jesus, that calls us into this ethic and this way of following him, that requires us to change so much about ourselves, to not accept the natural state we find ourselves in, but to aspire to something greater and to work towards that with, of course, only the help of God in the renewing of the mind and his guidance. That looks like something so different than an opiate or some self-soothing medication that just allows us to continue to go through life without great fears or great wonderment. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in doing self-evaluation and in critiquing ourselves and critiquing the Christian church, I think we have to think in terms of how we read Scripture, how we read Jesus, because I think both the Christian and the non-Christian tends to read Jesus very selectively, right? Yeah. There are things that Jesus says and things that he does that we accept because it does conform to our wishes. It is convenient. Yeah. And there are other things that Jesus says and things that Jesus does that we discard, that we ignore, that we brush to the side because we don't like it. Yeah. Because it doesn't conform to our values and our beliefs and what we want to be true. Yeah. The Christian is called to read Jesus not selectively, but to see the whole picture, everything Jesus said, everything Jesus did, and called to conform and submit to Jesus as Lord and to Jesus as speaking authoritatively. Yeah. that involves the things that I might not like.
At all.
Yep, the things that might go against my natural inclinations or natural ideas or values or whatever they might be. But to read Jesus and take everything he says and everything he does seriously.
So while Marx may have been onto something when he's giving the critique that religion is the opiate of the masses, it shouldn't be the case for Orthodox Christians.
No.
It should be anything but an opiate. It should be a daily self-reflection, making sure we're aligning our hearts, our affections, our desires, our habits to the way of Jesus and living that lifestyle out towards the world and the public square and the private spheres of our lives. And that's not going to be comfortable, and it's not going to be easy. And so we'd like to encourage all the Christians who are listening, pastors, friends who follow Jesus in the way, that don't fall into this trap that a lot of contemporary Christians and other religions are falling into. There is something to not staying the way that you are. You can come as you are, but don't stay that way. Ryan, thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This is Thinker Sensitive. I'm Chad, and be sure to check out our marijuana podcast. We try to answer the question as to whether or not Christians should engage recreational marijuana. Check out that season dropping next week. We'll talk to you soon.
For more Thinker Sensitive content, visit thinkersensitive.com.